Okay, so next up, we are going to have our first panel of the day, and this is going to be focused on rethinking decision-making processes with AI. So please welcome to the stage NTT Data's Chief AI Officer, Wendy Collins, Invisible AI's co-founder and CEO, Eric Danziger, and MLC's Senior Content Director, Penny Brown. Welcome, everyone.
To see all of you today here for our first panel discussion. And, you know, as David alluded to in his opening remarks this morning, we've done a lot of research around AI at the MLC and how manufacturers are looking to deploy it within their operations. And when we ask them what they want to get out of AI the most, what is the main reason why they're interested in deploying AI, it generally comes down to decision making as being that top reason. They really want to get those insights that are going to help them make better decisions throughout their operations. So as Ueosa was just alluding to, there's a lot of decisions in terms of product design, things like supplier negotiations, route optimization, all those kinds of things, just a fraction of the decisions that manufacturers are facing every day. So we're going to talk with Wendy and Eric about some of those decisions to put a little bit of context around it and maybe get you thinking about how this could work for within your company. So good morning, Wendy. Good morning, Eric. Glad to have you here. So, you know, we've spoken about some of the different ways that AI can impact decision making. So it could be, you know, human decisions or human-informed AI decisions or AI-only decisions. So let's think a little bit about how humans and AI can sort of play together in that decision-making sandbox. So Wendy, I'm going to start with you on this one. You know, what do you think the ratio is of those types of decisions in manufacturing currently, and how is that going to change in the future?
Well, you know, I talk to a lot of large enterprises, and we also talk with small to medium businesses that are in manufacturing as well. And I would say in the large enterprise space, we are seeing a small number, but a very meaningful investment in bringing AI and human decision making together. I would say that it's probably still 80 to 90% human only. But we're seeing progress, and I anticipate that that percentage of human only will continue to go down as we keep seeing higher order development in AI technology, and also, as I'm sure Eric would agree, in cleaner, higher quality, better integrated data.
Eric, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is something that we work with all of our customers on. I think it's interesting to see kind of how decisions get made today. It can be a very chaotic environment. And I think that, you know, one of the ironies anytime we deploy these systems is just by trying to kind of standardize the inputs and understand kind of what's actually happening, you've already helped hugely with human and AI decision making, right? And so I think at the end of the day, you know, the number of decisions that we can make with automated systems will definitely continue to go up. And to be honest, a lot of these are so complicated that they've been, you know, partially automated for a while, right? If you think about how you're going to allocate, you know, jobs in a manufacturing facility that has, you know, thousands of employees, or how you kind of, you know, mix vehicles in an automotive assembly line, right? They have to take into account the time it takes to do every step in each process, and they already are using some amount of kind of automated decision making to augment that, right? So as the number of kind of variables go up, and as your requirements go up, right? If we get to this kind of zero lead time design, the implication there is that you can also then set up a manufacturing process almost completely automated, right? And it may still have human assembly, right? But at least the design of that process and the ability to kind of stand that up, you now have to automate to be able to do it, to match that kind of immediate engineering decisions, right? So, yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see kind of how we do this transition to more and more kind of automated decision making.
And if I could add, I think there's a key difference between automation and autonomous, right? So maybe we just take a minute and unpack that. So when I think of automated, in fact, I'd be curious to see in the audience, how many of you have at least 50% of your manufacturing processes automated? In other words, no human intervention. Anybody have so it's there, right? And automation is different from autonomous. Automation is the automated process in a prescriptive fashion, right? So you've told the machine exactly what to do when. Autonomous is the ability to actually make decisions when things change, right? And so I think Eric is really on to something, that we are seeing an acceleration of automation with the emphasis of data and Gen AI, but I also think we're going to start seeing a greater acceleration towards autonomous changes in manufacturing as well.
So let's, shift gears a little bit, talking about acceptance. Michael Bennett this morning in his keynote sort of touched on our collective anxiety we might have a bit about AI. I've been to a lot of AI events this year and have read a lot about it. And, there's the saying about, understanding can be key to easing your anxiety. I can say that is not true for me personally. Don't know about the rest of you. But, I'll start, Eric, with you on this one. What do you think there's going to be a key driver, or what do you think those key drivers will be for accepting a shift to making more AI-driven decisions?
I think the number one driver, to be honest, is ultimately going to be value, right? I was actually just having lunch with an investor in a supply chain company, and he was telling me the story. They had come out of a university that spent 30 years developing this software to do dispatching for trucks, right? So this is for a trucking company. And in one of their early customers, all of a sudden, the actual kind of, driver value, right? The actual value per driver and revenue per driver was starting to just drop completely, right? So they just implemented the system, it was going down, they were freaking out. And so when they went in there, what they found is that actually the dispatcher didn't like the system and was completely ignoring the recommendations, right? And so they put their own person in there from the company and said, we're gonna try just for a week letting the system make all these decisions for us about dispatching, right? And all of a sudden, driver retention went up, the driver pay went up, right? They were making something like 20% more per driver than before they'd installed the system, right? And they had tons of evidence now that this works, right? And they're not going to have dispatchers, right? Like those companies now that have started to implement this are moving away from dispatchers completely, and they're going to use this system, right? And I think that the challenge, you have a lot of organizational challenges anytime you do a change like this, right? But if you can show definitively, right, that the results are better when we do it this way, I think that's the main thing at the end of the day.
I think, Eric, you are spot on when you say that value is the number one driver. I would say a very close second would be education. And I would say the adoption of AI has really fascinating human behavior implications. So how many of you in the audience have actually ridden in a Waymo, which is one of those driverless cars? So just a handful of you, yeah. So I live in San Francisco. We have Waymo that's going around the city. And I took my first Waymo car when I went to speak at a conference in Phoenix. That's where they launched Waymo. And I thought it was so exciting. I'm in the back seat, and I'm taking a video. I'm texting my husband, telling him, isn't this the coolest thing? And his immediate text back to me was, aren't you scared? And my husband's a tech executive. I've been in AI and tech my entire career. And we had wildly different reactions to autonomous vehicles. And I think we need to kind of come to terms with the fact that people who have very similar education, very similar life experiences, may have very different responses to AI in the manufacturing plant, in your life, in your home. And part of that is it's going to take time, and it's going to take education, and it's going to take us leaning into literacy. That's a phrase I use a lot, especially here when I have talks with manufacturing clients. Lean into literacy with your workforce, with your peers, with your executive C-suite, with your board. That is probably second only to value the biggest driver towards making progress.
So let's get into measurement, because clearly, we've talked about data and how this is feeding into all of what we can possibly do with AI and what that future looks like. If you now have the ability to measure so many more things, What can you talk about, Wendy, in terms of what's being measured now in manufacturing and how that's going to need to change to better enable AI-powered decisions?
Yeah, so I would answer that in two parts. First of all, I do think that manufacturers are measuring a lot, especially when it comes to their production processes and all of the data that is streaming, OT data that's streaming into your historians and elsewhere. I think the challenge is actually transforming that into value and taking advantage of that. So that I would say is number one. But the other interesting application of AI that we're working with a lot of clients on is taking a lot of their technical manual documents, maybe for troubleshooting or for engineering documents or field service technicians to be able to have access to how some of the underlying systems are working. That data, that technical information is really, in most cases, very well structured for human consumption. It's got embedded text and images and videos, and it's optimized for the way humans take in information. Unfortunately, it is not well optimized for the way computers and AI take in information. So I think one of the big things that's going to have to change, and it's going to have to change very quickly, is for you all to rethink how you capture that documentation and make sure that going forward for sure, and probably will take an exercise with existing documentation as well, to build that set of documentation in a way that is both human and computer consumable.
Eric, what do you think that sort of correlation is between what's being measured and how that might change in the future?
Yeah, I think, this is in a lot of ways a story of the last, 20 years or something in manufacturing, right? Where we have this idea of IoT and Industry 4.0 and all these things where you're creating now so much information that no one can really consume it, right? Most of this information is wasted. Very little of it's actually connected to each other. And I think this is a point that was brought up before, right? Like just the ability to kind of structure that data, put it in one place, right? Which is useful for an AI system, but also just useful for the organization, right? This is something that everyone that I've talked to has had some sort of struggle with, right? The idea that you'll have information from the same factory, but different parts of the assembly shop that are in completely different systems, right? That don't use the same units, that are just, for whatever reason, just they are not compatible with each other. And so I think in addition to trying to kind of digitize some of the things that aren't even digital today, right? Maybe work instructions on paper or whatever it is. I think the ability to kind of put everything into the same place and structure it as the first step for AI is honestly just great for the organization, right? You're gonna get value just from that at the very beginning. I think what we see is, for us, we layer on video as a kind of an additional stream of information, right? So this is something that some manufacturers have in various formats. A lot of them use security cameras. But that gives you an entirely new, very rich stream of information that if you lay all of that kind of IoT or existing digital signal on top of, can actually tell you what's happening, right? This is something that we find, I don't know, it was very funny actually with some of our kind of early customers, right? Before we'd even train them how to use the AI systems that we developed, right? They were already using our system just with the video, just to see what was going on, right? And you show up and you're like, we haven't even trained them yet. Like, what are they doing? And so they, I think being able to put everything into one place, being able to add these new kind of layers of information, right? All of a sudden you're starting to transform this into something that's useful for the people that work there, right? And then on top of that, we can start to augment those decisions. And really, one of the key components with AI when you're talking about kind of operational data is just narrow it down, right? Like just help me understand what's important, what I actually need to pay attention to, and reduce this from, 3 shifts worth of information down to the, 4 or 5 things that really matter. So I think that, transformation is going to be really, really impactful. And again, just getting the data in the same place is half the battle at the end of the day.
So your opinion is it's going to be more helpful in terms of the contextualization overall in terms of what people are seeing?
I think, what you want, right, is this kind of holistic view ultimately of a product manufacturing lifecycle, right, where you basically take a product from the beginning to the end, right, and you can see all of the various information about the machines that are doing the production, about the people, right? And at the end of the day, right, when there's a defect, not just that, this part of the process was messed up, right? But you can see all of the information from every single part of that process for that product life cycle. Somebody was describing this to me as like a passport in automotive for the vehicle, right? Where you make a vehicle and you have all of these complexities that are going into it. You have engineering design challenges that might lead to a warranty in the future, right? You have differences in suppliers. You have, the actual assembly that's happening that's highly variable. It's really hard to know ultimately what's causing some of these challenges, right? And so if you could go back 6 months later, let's say, right, and review everything that had happened instead of just trying to guess, basically, like what caused this issue, what was the root cause, that is hugely, hugely impactful. But again, that's a ton of information, and to be able to kind of combine it and to narrow it down is very, very challenging without some sort of automated, some sort of intelligent system, let me say, yeah.
So a lot of the conversation that we've had around AI and sort of, its existence, I guess, on the shop floor or in operations has been more almost as like a colleague or a coworker versus, say, in a leadership role. But I know, Wendy, you and I were at the Manufacturing Institute's Workforce Summit back in October, and we touched a little bit about, within that panel, what does it look like when AI is not just your colleague, but it might actually be making sort of leadership decisions. So, let's dive into that a little bit, because there's a distribution of decision making across leadership functions with AI. How do you think leadership decisions are going to be impacted by AI?
Well, I think AI is a really great thought partner for leaders. I use it in my day-to-day job. I have conversations with ChatGPT, with tools like Perplexity, to help me think, including things that I haven't experienced, or that, to Dr. Bennett's comments earlier, I don't have the pattern recognition ability across a large enough data set to be able to perceive some of the patterns. So leaning into having AI as a thought partner for leaders, I think, is an amazing first step, and I would encourage all of you to start experimenting with that. And certainly, is there a future where we could see, I think David mentioned it, a digital CFO or an AI CFO, or some other type of leadership executive? I see that is a possibility. I think there are some practical barriers today, and a lot of them come down to data and terminology and other complexities in especially the manufacturing world today that will make that road to get there a little bit longer and harder, but it certainly is a possible future.
So Eric, I guess in sort of tailing on to that, do you think that all leadership roles are going to be equally impacted by this, or do you think there's going to be a difference based on, say, you're a CFO, you're a CMO, something along those lines? How do you think leadership roles are going to be impacted directly by AI?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, right? I think definitely giving you tools to help you with your job. I think a lot of the decision making that you have to do in a leadership position, right? There's a ton of kind of synthesis that's got to happen first, right? So you have to take in information from all over the organization, right? You might have someone that's helping you, if you're the CFO, for example, right, to get all of the P&Ls for all of your divisions together or something, right? And to help you do that first line of analysis, right? Like, there's a ton of those kind of functions that AI will definitely help with. I think one of the things to keep in mind, though, is that at the end of the day, like, the role of a leader in an organization is still to, set the larger direction and to bring everybody with you, right? And so those components those are fundamentally human jobs, right? Like, that is something that you as a leader are still going to have to do, even if the kind of underlying data that you make a decision on is highly automated, right? And if there's an automated system that's telling you, this is where we think there's, the most waste in this organization, right? You're still going to have to make the decision about whether or not you eliminate all the bathrooms because you're spending so much on toilet paper, right? You probably don't want to do that, right? And so, I think that's just one of those things where, at the end of the day, you are going to still, have a major role to play as a leader. You just might have maybe a smaller staff, is kind of the way I think about it.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about sort of those types of decisions, again, that AI is going to influence. Hopefully it's not, getting rid of bathrooms and, spending less on toilet paper, but, is it really going to be a matter of where a decision is made or why it's made in terms of what AI will impact the most? So Eric, we'll start with you on that one. So when I mean where, so something like on the shop floor in forecasting or new product development versus why, which would be the type of decision. Is it operational? Is it strategic? Something along those lines. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this is honestly a huge theme for us, right, in terms of basically being able to kind of push more and more decisions to lower levels of the organization. I think this is kind of the counterpoint to the idea that you can have better information and better kind of decision making at a leadership level, right? You can give the same tools to people that may not have the ability to understand or kind of do that data synthesis themselves, right? And so if all of a sudden your supervisors that actually understand the manufacturing process and what's actually happening, right? If they can get that information about where the biggest wastes are in a line, right? They can use kind of their tribal knowledge, right, about how things work and about what actually is happening, and that additional kind of higher level information that may have come originally from an industrial engineer or somebody like that, right, to help make those decisions and to start, doing their kind of process improvements and all those things more in a more streamlined fashion, right, with less layers, with less additional input. And I think, giving everybody the ability, I think, and really this is the story, honestly, of technology, right, is taking somebody from just, a set of hands to, thinking a lot more in every single job, right, and giving them the ability to use their mind, even at the lowest levels, to help do these improvements, right, and to see kind of what the actual process waste may be in a line, or even from a supply perspective, right? We've had issues. I've seen just so many issues where people on the assembly line understand a challenge, right? Like there's a great one. We did a model turnover with a big automotive customer, right? They are the best in the world at process. They are the best in the world at lean, and yet when they released the new model of a vehicle, right, all of the engineering assembly steps that they released to the floor were from the previous model 5 years ago, right? So they had lost 5 years of process improvements because engineering had no idea what the actual shop floor was doing. And everyone who was working on that line was so frustrated, right? Because now they've just gone back in time to a way that was really challenging to do, that they didn't like, right? That they had spent years improving, and none of that was communicated, right? And so that at the end of the day, there's so much information that they have, being able to help them leverage that to kind of be decision makers at a little bit higher level is going to make a huge impact in all these organizations.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. The answer is yes, and. I don't think it's a matter of either where or why. I think we all, as humans, make better decisions when we have more context. And I think that's the big value add that AI and Gen AI can bring is at our fingertips, more context to make better decisions. And that's irrespective of whether you're working on the shop floor or whether you're working in the R&D lab or whether you're working in the front office. And think about you as a human. Let's just go with the example that you're a supervisor on a production line. Depending on how long you've been in that role, you may not know, to Eric's point, you may not know what has happened in the last 5 years. So that's, I think, one of the exciting opportunities that Gen AI and AI in general can bring is that additional context, the additional awareness, the additional information that is much easier to access going forward. So not when, not where, not why, but all of the above.
Right. So let's talk, a little bit about organizational size, because, clearly small, medium manufacturers versus larger enterprises are going to be facing different types of decisions on a day-to-day basis regardless. But how is organizational size going to influence the way decisions are made with AI? Wendy, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, sure. So large enterprises often have the ability to lean into custom solutions. So they partner with the Microsofts or the OpenAIs or the Anthropics of the world and can actually build for themselves custom solutions. And that's often important and required because large enterprises often come with lots of complexity, right? But what I think is exciting for small to medium enterprises, like many of you probably here, is that there are consortiums and there are other members of the community, which I heard David reference, and I love that as one of his key 5 things to think about. Don't go it alone. You don't have to go it alone. There are also other, I'll call them NGOs, but there are private companies and organizations that will help you find like companies and that you can join forces with and then co-invest to build out things or to acquire tools for your own organization. So while the access and the budget may be different, there are equal opportunities depending on where you sit and how you partner.
Eric, how do you think organizational size is going to factor into this?
Yeah, I think it's, I think the first thing is, from a data and a process perspective, these organizations can be, a little bit different, right? So a huge organization is going to have better process, right? And that is one of the keys, right, as the previous speaker is talking about, right? When they kind of created this engineering process so they could do these designs, right? You have to know what that process is, and it has to be documented for that to even start happening, right? And sometimes in smaller manufacturers, that process, is very informal, right? People just know their jobs, and they show up to work, and that's all that it is. So being able to document that process is kind of an important step in anything related to AI, and that's, I think, one of the challenges we've seen with kind of small or medium manufacturers. But the flip side is, from a data perspective, right, it's a lot of times much easier in a smaller organization because IT might just be one person, right? And all of a sudden, those 6 months of conversation about whether you can have access to this system or that system, all of that can happen much more quickly. They might already be on a more modern set of systems. So, I think there's some opportunities that they have as well. But I think ultimately, one of the stories that we're seeing already with software engineering, specifically in AI, is that doing some of that kind of customization and kind of designing things for your organization and kind of giving you the ability to take a piece of software and instead of having it just be generic, which is kind of what you've had to deal with a lot of times as a smaller organization, to help have it be customized for you in a way that's significantly less expensive than it used to be and doesn't necessarily require a huge organization like Microsoft or somebody to do this for you, right? You might be able to do it with many less people using kind of all of the advanced tools that we have now in software engineering to kind of modify any of the software systems that you're going to have for your organization, which is really, I think, going to be pretty exciting. But I think, at the end of the day, it's really ultimately just about the kind of direction that you want to go as an organization, right? If you're investing in this and if you're educating your people, right, and getting everybody on board with this idea that you're going to try and put all the data in one place, you're going to institute process, you're going to make better decisions, then any organization really can be ready for this, I think.
So we've got about 30 seconds left. Real quick, I'm going to ask both of you. Wendy, start with you. What do you think the one thing is that manufacturers need to think about the most in terms of their future of decision making with AI?
Please don't wait. Please start now if you aren't already. I mean, you heard Dr. Bennett talk about what's coming in the future, agentics, all kinds of really exciting advanced technology. If you haven't started, please start now because it will be a much harder road to catch up.
Eric, what's the key thing that manufacturers need to think of in this space?
I think, kind of tying on to this, right, I think the biggest argument for starting this process now, even if you're unsure about the ultimate outcomes, is again, just that, trying to wrangle all of your data into one system, right? Trying to implement process just by themselves are valuable, right? Like just the act of setting up for AI is going to create value in the organization. And so I think, you will get something out of it regardless of the state of the systems that we have today. And to her point, it's changing incredibly quickly, right? What we're seeing is there's the kind of classic Gartner hype cycle, right? And it feels like in the AI space that it's absolutely compressing in the sense that, we are really the product of a hype cycle from 5 or 10 years ago, right? And already we have a new hype cycle in AI, right? And there's going to be another hype cycle in AI probably in 2 or 3 years, right? And so it's, whatever the state of the technology today, whatever your kind of opinion of its readiness is, it's going to keep improving. It's going to keep happening. And by the time the next hype cycle comes and everybody in the C-suite gets super excited about AI again, right, there's going to be a whole host of new technologies that we can use that are mature, that have actually been through that Gartner curve already, right? And so, I think the reality is that this transformation has got so much momentum already. It's happening. There's no question about it. And it's just a question of kind of the posture that each individual company is going to take. And I think that if we start to see companies like Eaton actually get to a 0 lead time on new product, that's a huge competitive advantage, right, at the end of the day. And any organization that has kind of put it off or dismissed it, when those companies start to actually see the results and the benefits of it, it's going to be really, really challenging to catch up. So absolutely, I think this is a time to start investing.
Wendy, Eric, you've been excellent panelists. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank